The Franchise Woman is a bi-monthly digital magazine that empowers women as they navigate the franchising industry by providing relevant news, tools, advice, and inspiration. We are a resource for women who are seeking to own their own businesses, improve their existing businesses, find creative solutions, and take advantage of franchise opportunities. We feature women in the business who best exemplify our ideals and have something to teach our readers. In addition to our exclusive articles relating to the female entrepreneur, we also feature brands that are geared for women. Women have become the fastest growing sector in business ownership and have become a powerful, influenceable force fueling the economy. The Franchise Woman will give you the news that is relevant to you to help you navigate the path of successful franchise ownership. By women, for women, and about women. We are the Franchise Woman. Join us today at www.thefranchisewoman.com. Welcome to the podcast where passion and purpose collide. We are on a mission to interview women and the occasional token man about how their passion and purpose have collided to create healthy relationships and profitable businesses. I am Elizabeth Denham here with Rebecca Monet. We are the founders of The Coterie for Women and the publishers of the Franchise Woman magazine. Rebecca, why don't you let everyone know who we have on the show today?
This is a special show, actually. Female millennials in franchising. So putting this group together was an exciting adventure, and I'm so glad that you guys volunteered or were volunteered to be on the show. So I'd like to take just a minute or two for each of you to tell our listeners who you are, how long you've been in franchising, a little bit about your background, if you could do that for me. And Alicia, let's start with you first.
Hi, my name is Alicia Harkins. I am the local owner of Mosquito Hunters here on Long Island. We're in Suffolk County, if you're familiar. I have been in franchising for 2 years. We're going into our second year of business. I got into Mosquito Hunters, like I said, 2 years ago. We were looking for an option to buy a business. We were looking at existing businesses. We were looking at franchise options. So we kind of had our fingers in everything looking around. Ended up on Mosquito Hunters because we liked the attitude. We liked the partial year business. We liked a quote unquote, let's say. We liked the customer service, and it's a fun business. We wanted a customer service business. So my background is I was in restaurants for many years, bartender, really into customer service in all aspects. So I got really good at that aspect of it. And then most recently, I was the kickboxing instructor before the franchise. And that was a lot of fun too. It was actually a franchise company, so I got to work with those local owners in building their business as well. So that was a good experience. And in my personal life, I'm a mom. I have a 2.5-year-old. I have another one on the way due June 2nd. So busy family life as well.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, I love it. And I love that you brought up the thing about customer service, because the restaurant business is 100% customer service.
Yeah.
And it's repeat customers, as is Mosquito Hunter. So I can see where that would be a really good fit for you. Elise, let's go to you. Tell us a little bit about your background and what franchise you're involved with.
Yes, so Elise Biviano, and I own Care Patrol of Spokane in Eastern Washington State. And at Care Patrol, we help seniors as a complimentary service to them and their families find housing or in-home care. We work with in-home care, independent living, assisted living, memory care, and small private homes. And my background is a passion for seniors. I've worked with the aging population for almost 15 years. And so owning a franchise where I could be an expert in the market and guide families to quality options has been super rewarding, and everything that I was really looking for. So love what I do. I'm also a mom. I have a 6-year-old son, and a huge chocolate lab. So lots of time with them when I'm not helping seniors. So thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, we love having you. A millennial who loves elders. I'm worried about this, to be honest, because I had this conversation with my daughter and she doesn't like old people. And I'm like, I hope you change your attitude once I'm really old.
I'll tell you, I've gotten the best parenting advice from my senior clients.
Absolutely.
So, quality there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Crones. We're crones at some point where we share our wisdom.
Right.
Liz, tell us about you and your background. You were a franchisee for a while, then you went another direction, and now you're back in-house at Franchise System. So tell us all about it.
So I was a franchisee, or I've been in franchising since 2013. I was a franchisee first for an in-home tutoring concept. Then it moved over to Frank Connect, where I spent 5 years growing with over 400 brands. And for those of you who don't know Frank Connect, I'll do a plug, largest franchising software in the industry. Still love them. And today I'm with Home Franchise Concepts, which is a franchisor. I moved over here in October to kind of wear that franchisor hat. So I like to say at this point, I've had a seat at all the tables. And so lots of experience and a passion for franchising and helping businesses grow. I too am a mom of an 8-year-old and a soon to be 4-year-old, a girl and a boy. I got my pair and now I'm done.
Nice.
Yeah, I get it. So your role at HFC, Home Franchise Concept, they currently have 4 brands, I believe. Your role, what is it exactly that you do? You actually are helping the franchisees in some of their operations, correct?
Correct. Yeah, I'm a business coach. With HFC, it's called a regional operations manager. So I get to help small businesses grow to whatever level they want to be at, which is extremely fun. So we've got, the guys who would rather just have their own business and operate individually. And then we have the folks who are building enterprises and everyone in between. And it's really a good time. We work through business planning and we work through all sorts of, questions that they might have. And businesses are complex. So I take the sort of use cases and experience I had at Frank Connect and then owning my own business, and I'm able to bring them to the franchisees here at HFC.
Excellent. All right, Miss Elizabeth, what's our first question for our panel of millennials?
Well, and I think that we have a varying age group of millennials. So some of you might be on different spectrums throughout it, which I think is important too, because everybody's perspective can be a little bit different even within a generation. But in terms of that, as millennials, what would you like the people that you work with, either your franchisor, your franchisees, your employees, your customers, what would you like them to know about working with you? What is unique about working with you, and what is the best way in terms of communication and relationship to work with each of you?
So I think for me, I'm at the sort of older end of the millennials, like right at the cusp. And in fact, I hate to really be labeled millennial because they have such a bad rap, And so from a communication standpoint, I really, especially for folks that are at this point older than me or even younger than me, I think that they don't think that I have experience, right? And so I think there's a lot of valuable experience that millennials have now, and the best way to communicate with the millennials to really draw on that experience. And frankly, we're all adults, and adults love to draw on experience when they're learning. And so I think that that's the biggest thing that I could impart on anybody is don't be afraid to listen. There is valid experience here, despite what others have said about our generation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I like that Liz mentioned kind of being labeled. Unfortunately, I think, if someone knows, around your age group, they will make an assumption to text you instead of calling you. So I think, just like I've learned, with how to communicate to each family I work with, it's just ask, what do you like? And I think, how we're communicating with each other, just like I communicate with a senior, I don't call him honey and sweetie, an 85-year-old, woman I'm serving. Don't call me kiddo. I'm not your kiddo. So I think being appropriate is important and being mindful of terms that we're using, and we use them in an endearing way. But I think as a younger woman, a business owner, some of that can come off a little demeaning, you know? So I think being mindful of that.
Excellent.
I like that. Great points. And, you know, as far as communicating too, I like what you said. They assume maybe I'll text you instead, and that's not always the best or easiest way to get a hold of you. So, I mean, for me, phone calls, it's not typical for a millennial, but pick up the phone. It's the fastest, easiest way to do it. I'm
I
okay with
completely
texting,
agree.
but like, don't social media message me. That's my bottom line. Don't do it.
Good point, Alicia. Yes, no.
I
Exactly.
won't answer for you for at least a week on principle.
So, I mean, obviously we're aging a little bit here because we prefer picking up the phone.
Well, and
Maybe
to your
it's a business
point, Liz, Rebecca, why don't you define millennial for the
I will.
audience? Because
Yeah,
I
let me-
think a lot of people think they're younger than they are.
Yeah.
Millennials are not
you
babies
get that
anymore.
right.
We're not.
Not as young as we used to be. Well, neither was I.
Yeah.
But here, just a few, for those of you that don't know what a millennial is someone born between 1981 and 1996. So they'd be 25 to 40 years old is about the age that a millennial would be. Just if you haven't researched millennials, they are the most educated generation ever. They're also the most civic minded generation ever. They are socially conscious individuals, whether that's with economic issues, environmental issues, health issues, just social issues in general. They're very conscious. We call them, in my world, in the profiling world, we call you conscious capitalists. So you're still all about success and making money and building an empire and all those things, but doing so in a socially responsible and conscious kind of way. This generation also is the most entrepreneurial minded generation ever. So franchisors, if you're listening to this, listen to these ladies. They know what they're talking about. This is an entrepreneurial generation, and we need to pay attention to what they're saying. Some of the wonderful gifts that millennials seem to have is you're more flexible than previous generations, especially my generation, the baby boomer generation. We're a little bit rigid, but you're adaptable. You're flexible. You're also very team oriented, and you have literally created something called the share culture, where you're sharing knowledge, you're co-creating, you're co-producing, you're sharing resources. So it's definitely a collaborative kind of culture. So those of you that have given the millennials a bad rap, I wanted you to hear all the fabulous things about the millennials. All right.
Here's a question that we ask a lot on the show, or it just comes up a lot because we talk to so many women of so many varying generations, and we talk a ton about imposter syndrome and the fact that so many women walk around with it. You have women who are high up in their roles, who you would never guess would have that affliction, but they do. And so, but interestingly, Rebecca's research has shown that millennials are some of the more confident generations. So my question is, do you find in your observations of yourself and others, do you suffer from imposter syndrome, one? And number two, do you think it is either, if you don't, I want to hear about that, or do you think it's reduced from older generations of women, and why? So that's kind of where I want to go with this part of the conversation.
I mean, personally, I had to look up the term.
Oh, that's so funny.
I've never heard of it before.
Oh, funny.
So no, and then I looked up the definition, and I feel like it does not apply to me at all, which is, I would say maybe I'm just confident in what I'm doing. I feel like I'm meant to be a business owner. I like juggling a lot of tasks. I like building the business. I like seeing it grow. It's fun. It's hard, but it's exciting.
But you have no doubt of your place, your role, and your authority in your job.
No. None at all.
That's
I mean,
very interesting.
you know what? I'll say at the beginning. So my father-in-law is my business partner,
Mhm.
and people would look at him as the leader, you know, of the duo.
Mhm.
And I was like, well, he's kind of like wanting to retire. I'm the one running the business, you know? So I
Right.
kind of had to establish my footing in the community, but I feel like that's been done and I'm off and running. So
That's
There.
interesting. What about the others?
I think I can say that I probably had imposter syndrome when I was younger. So like in my 20s, when my first job was selling homes, I had no business selling homes. Like it doesn't matter how much training I got, I had no business doing that. And then I moved to a career where I was managing 65 people, also no business doing that. And I don't mean that I had no business. I was very well educated. I had all of the tools, but I never felt like I was good enough, you know, or like that I had the skills. And then I owned my own business. And I will say I can distinctly remember thinking to myself, I don't have children that are school age. You have no business owning a tutoring company. And then as I've gotten more and more experience in franchising, I'm very clear about this being the place where I belong. So now the authority is easy and the confidence is easy. But it took me some time to get to this place where I'm like, hey, I'm not an imposter. I know what I'm talking about. Trust me. So that's my perspective. It's been a little while though. Some growing.
It's
Yeah.
a journey, right?
Yes, it
Yeah.
absolutely is.
I
Elise?
would agree. Yeah. You know, being, you know, younger and in earlier roles, I can absolutely relate with this kind of fear that, you know, am I doing the right thing kind of all the time? And I think that for me, you know, you use it as empowerment. So I use that, but I definitely can relate to others that have felt that. And when you take the time and effort and your results are there, it's like, hey, this is absolutely, like Liz was saying, what I meant to do. And I think as a young business owner, I can say when I would introduce myself, sometimes I would just introduce myself as a care advisor. And when I did introduce myself as an owner, I was sometimes met with like disbelief, like, oh, wow, or oh, wow. And I actually had a gentleman like pat me on the shoulder and say, good for you. And the imposter syndrome came into play there. I internalized that a little bit.
Yeah.
And I, you know, I think that you just can't really care what others think, you know, in that sense. And we all, you know, work on our own self-worth and self-confidence. It's really, I know I'm the expert. I know I'm good at this. I know this is something I care about more than anything. So really none of that actually matters. I mean, I can remember Googling, how do I look older?
Yes,
and trying to figure out if I should like fake that I need glasses or, you know, and, you know, at the end of the day, somebody said to me, and it was a friend, you know, who I worked with and said, you don't need to, because right when we know we're doing the right thing by our customers, our clients, in my sense, and my families, that's really the end all be all. I don't have to wear glasses or cut my hair short or, you know, anything else. So I can relate.
totally cut my hair short. Did that.
Oh, that's
in a
so
bob.
funny.
You did it. You
That
did
is-
it, didn't you? Yeah.
I
Some-
did it.
That's
Convinced
so interesting.
myself I could get you a headshot.
No offense to anyone with short hair. It's not an age thing. I don't think it is. Google led me astray.
Google led you astray.
Oh my
Oh,
God.
that's too funny. My mom told me one time in my 30s that I was too old for long hair, and clearly I listened.
Yes, here I am with my long hair.
Isn't that
Yep.
funny?
Oh, wow.
Like if I have short hair, I'll look like a chia pet. This is just a practical thing, you know? So why do you think this is? Because this is a much different perspective than we normally have gotten from women, let's just say in their mid to late 40s or 50s or older. When you say, Rebecca, a lot of people have arrived at sort of a pinnacle point and still feel like they either they don't have, it's not a lack of confidence necessarily, but it's a lack of acceptance or taking that authority and not being afraid to say it or use it or being afraid to articulate that to others. I think there's something sometimes that holds some women back from claiming that. Rebecca and I have talked about this kind of thing before, claiming the authority that we know the things that we're good at, and why shouldn't we be able to say, like you said, Elise, I know what I'm good at. I know that I know this business inside and out, and I know that people need to listen to me. Why do you think that the perspective might be different? Which is a hard question because you don't live outside of your own experience. But from observations,
Tell you from a baby boomer perspective, right? I mean, you girls are so much more confident than I was at your age. So much more confident. But my generation was really the first couple of generations where women were hitting the workforce and doing things. So it was a battle of not just youth, but it was a battle of gender at that point, that the females didn't have as much credibility or as authority. When I first hit the world of business ownership, and stepped out there, you guys are coming in so much more confident. And I didn't mean to interrupt your train of thought there, Elizabeth, because I think you're absolutely right. What has allowed you to take this kind of authority, this kind of position where generations before, we haven't had that same level of trust in ourselves or feeling
or ownership? I think it's to do with ownership, because we felt like we had to appear a certain way or present a certain way or demur or defer. You know what I mean? So tell us what you think the difference is.
I mean, that's interesting.
Women like you.
We trailblazed for you, right?
Yes, you did.
I feel like the changing perspective is probably because of exactly like you said, the women were new to the workforce at a certain point in time. And then now it's normal. Now we're an authority in the workplace. We're the same in the workplace, I feel like. And we just take charge of that position and go, you know, like I definitely see like why women before us could have been nervous and self-doubting before.
And I think you do it. I think one of the journeys of sort of getting older, and I say that, one of the journeys of getting older is establishing that authority and watching people respect it. Like I can't say, like I already said, I had imposter syndrome when I was younger, totally, because I just felt like I didn't have any business being where I was. You know, but you get to this point in your career where you say, I am an expert. I do know what I'm talking about. And people notice that and come to you for that expertise. And I think that's how you sort of get out of this imposter syndrome feeling, is that, oh yeah, I am making a mark in this trade, and people are noticing, and I can be confident in that. I don't necessarily, one of the things too is this whole like accolades, you know, like, yes, I've earned those accolades. Did I earn them before? I'm not so sure. Like my you know, my self-conscious in my prior careers would say, probably not. But the praise that I have now, certainly I feel like that's deserved. So anyway, that's just my thought.
Elise, you're working with, you know, even beyond my age, you're working with my mother and father's age, and you have this youth, and of course, being a female. How do you deal with it? Is it a bigger difference the bigger the generational gap, or is it actually easier the bigger the generational gap?
Yeah, I think it's a personality thing sometimes, right? And I think that there are people that embrace change and there's people that don't. And, you know, embracing younger people to help you with certain things is embracing a level of change, which is hard. You know, so definitely working with the older population. I mean, I feel like there can be trust in the sense, just like you would trust your granddaughter. You know, and these are places I would recommend for my grandma. So I think we all put those things into perspective. You know, I chose, because I work with such a large age gap, you know, I have a credential that's called a CSA, a Certified Senior Advisor, and I have actually studied about baby boomers, about how to communicate with that generation. So I think it's about
Goodness.
educating yourself too, that
Yeah.
my way, or how I was raised, we as millennials, we have to embrace all the other, generations and what makes sense. And so the way I communicate with my 90-year-old client isn't the same way I'm communicating with the 30-year-old social worker. And if we're not making those changes and soliciting that path, then kind of shame on all of us a little bit there. So and I just want to go back to saying that I've watched strong women in my life, and that is so huge, from my grandmother to my mother to an executive director in a community I worked under, watching women who had passion and action. Because being a millennial and being confident and showing what we can do is all about putting action behind what we say. I think that's the criticism, is that we're a little almost kind of complacent and hard to get a hold of. Or there's a lot of action, and should be a lot of action behind whatever we're preaching. If we're owning a business, or supporting franchisees in their businesses, whatever we're doing. So.
Elise, you said something. Oh, go ahead, Rebecca.
No, go, Liz. Your opinion is more important than mine.
Elise, you said something that kind of made me think about my mom. And I agree with you, because this whole time I've sort of been thinking about socioeconomic background and how I had a mom who didn't graduate college, right? She graduated high school, but never went to college. Well, just for a semester or two. And I think part of her imposter syndrome, which she doesn't have today because she's an expert in her field, but I think there may have been a time where she felt like she wasn't good enough, or that her accolades weren't good enough, sort of looking at her today, because she didn't have that education. Even sometimes today she'll say, oh, well, I can't apply for this particular position because they say a college degree is required. And she's like, it doesn't matter that I have 30 years of experience in this field. They want a college degree.
Yeah.
And so like, I can see how that prior generation could sort of feel a certain way about themselves. And so I thought I would add that, because I think it's important to think, the education, the socioeconomic background also does impact, I think, our perspectives too on what we're capable of doing. Because I've seen like other millennials who didn't grow up with powerful and strong women in their life, and they do tend to have this imposter syndrome. So I think there is something more to it than just our perspective here today. So
it's true. I want to address something that you brought up here, intertwined with one of the bad raps that millennials do have, is a lot of talk and no action kind of thing. At least you brought that up. And I'm a behavioral scientist, and we run profiling tools. Each of your company actually uses the Zoracle tools, which is how I got to reach out to you. But it's interesting, this idea of just that, because when we looked at the statistics of the boomer versus the generation X versus millennial versus the Zs, we see a steady decline in initiative. And so the achievement drive, the drive for success remained high. That didn't drop. You guys are just as driven as other generations, in fact, slightly more so. But the action, the initiative, the courage to step out and do what needs to be done day in and day out, that follow through is dropping with each generation. So it's really kind of a disconnect between I want to be successful, I want to build an empire, but I also don't want to get out and cold call, and I don't want to go to that meeting, and I don't want to, I'd rather go skiing or do something else. So I think you hit the nail on the head when you said that, some of this bad rap is coming from the drive is there, the words are there, but sometimes the action doesn't follow it up. I haven't seen that with you three. I got to tell you, all three of you got back to me just like that and asked questions, and you were right on top of it. But would you agree that is some of what the millennials are dealing with, is this conflict of I want it all, I want to be successful, but I really don't want to put in a whole lot of effort?
I feel like that's what annoys me the most about the stereotypical millennial. I don't like to be categorized necessarily as a
Mhm. I
millennial,
know.
but we can all change that. We can help each other out. We can lead by example.
And I think that, yeah, so it gives you a roadmap if you're, we choose to employ people. I mean, I'm sure you have employees and people you work with. So if I'm going to employ someone that's maybe a millennial and that achievement's there and the action isn't, clear expectations and clear guidelines and steps throughout. But I think it's a thing. And I think social media, I think that social media and I think there's a lot more social anxiety. And I think, getting out there and being on your own or going to these kind of things is harder for people who have lived behind a more, digital world, and being in the, I grew up, talking to people and hanging out and riding my bike all night. And I'm not quite, I feel like part of that. And I think that may be a more problematic in the future, But.
Well, it's interesting. My children range from 14 to 22. And my daughter, who's 22, I have a daughter and a son who are both 22. They're step siblings, which is really interesting to see a boy and a girl side by side. But one of the things, I sponsored her high school newspaper, and they were so afraid to make a phone call. Like when she was 16, 17, 18 and applying for college stuff, she would sit there. We had 3 desks in the study, and she's supposed to be making calls, and I hear her typing, and I'm like, what are you doing? And she's like, I'm getting ready. And I'm like, pick up the phone.
What I want to say.
She's like, well, I don't know what I want to say. And I was like, say, hello, my name is Hannah. I've applied to school. Do you have my ACT scores? Do you have my transcript? Do you have this? I'm like, but it was weird. It's like you talked about, Elise, the social anxiety. Like when they were writing news stories for the high school newspaper, they would have a 2-word quote. And I'm like, where's the quote? Well, they never texted me back. I'm like, what? You texted them? No. You find an in-person interview. You're at school, or you do a phone call or an email at the very worst. You never text. So I think the experience is so completely different. And that's a younger generation than you all. But I think the trend had begun, the electronic trend and the less phone calls. I mean, that's just a skill that some people are struggling to find. And I made them, like my son worked at Subway and he was like, I'm really good at small talk now. Well, for him, he was, but for the average bear, he was not, So it's an interesting thing how your experience shapes that kind of communication. Have you found that in working with other millennials, that is hard even for you all working within peer groups?
I think for me, the thing that I recognize in other millennials, I think, for the most part, the folks that I'm around work hard. Yeah. It kind of comes back to my tutoring where I had some kids with executive functioning disorder, right? It's like I have this big project to do, but I don't know how to break it into steps so that I can get it done. And I really think that is a thing. Like I look at people and we've got these goals to achieve and the steps to get there. And I think that's why we generationally, and I don't know about you, Elizabeth and Rebecca, but when we go to like these conferences and things, we want them to tell us like the 5 steps to X, right? Like break it down, make it simple so that I can get to the end goal. Exactly. But I really think that there's something to that. So anyway, that's my thought.
What do you think, Alicia, about working with other millennials? Elise mentioned, obviously it's about expectations and setting clear expectations. And Liz is talking about break it down into pieces. How do you do you hire millennials?
Yeah, so I mean, this is kind of our first season to hire into. So this is my first experience with hiring. We just actually hired 5 new employees, which is great. 4 of them are going to be technicians, and 1 is going to be a sales and marketing intern with me. I'm hoping to kind of pass a little bit of that off so I can get forth and have a new baby for a few weeks. Yeah. Fingers crossed I can pass off all that responsibility. But yeah. It's been it hasn't been a problematic at all yet. But I will say during the hiring process, there was not a lot of follow through, and I don't know everyone's age. So I can only speculate, but just like even reaching out, like I would be the one sending an email and then giving a call and leaving a voicemail, and then and then you're not gonna check your email. Like, did nobody check their email? Nobody. Not a single one of you. So I don't know. It's I don't know if it's the workforce. Like, people don't necessarily want to work as much. They don't want to put in hard work and sweat, and I don't know, getting free money from the government maybe doesn't help either. So
This is true.
I think one thing that's overlooked too as a millennial is I feel pressure to be on every platform. And I think that, we get a bad rep, but I'm trying to manage, 27 platforms, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, my work email, my personal email, my other social media out. I mean, and I want to read the news and I want to listen to this podcast. And, so I think that we live in a world where it's hard and there's a lot, we're inundated. And I've had that same experience, Alicia, people actually setting up interviews and not showing up. I mean, right. And so I think that it's also an overwhelming world. And I think we all, now that we're living in this world, especially after the pandemic, we have to pick and choose and be mindful. I turned off certain alerts on my phone. Right. And set up who's allowed to notify me of stuff, right. Because we're so inundated that I think we've grown up with that. And I feel it's like, I can handle this. I can do it all. You can't, nobody can. It's not, that's why there's agencies, you pay thousands of dollars even to manage it all. Because
have you ever seen a message come across a notification and then you can't find it? Like, it's something you want to respond to and you can't find which portal to answer it in. I spent like 20 minutes one day trying to find this one message. I'm like, I know I saw that, but I didn't click it in time. And now I have no idea which portal to check.
Exactly. Exactly.
Or you swear you responded.
Oh yeah, I respond in my head all the time.
Yeah.
And it's because we're inundated though, Elise. That's exactly right.
Yeah, it's
overwhelming. Where exactly did they message me?
Oh my God.
Well, I want to shift gears a little bit, Alicia, to what this was a question that just sort of came to me as you were talking about motherhood and taking some time off for your child. My friend Allison's in her early 40s, and she's a vice president of a health insurance company. And so she's got a big job. She's got 2 young children. She's going through a divorce. And she was always one of those who tried to hide. She didn't hide the fact that she was a mother, but she kept that schedule so separated so that she was not viewed to be unprofessional. So now in that she just got this different job and she's just gotten this vice president role. And she's like, you can schedule a meeting with me, that's fine, but I'm going to be in car line at 9. So I'm either going to be in the car, or you can schedule it at 9:30 when I'm home. And she is not apologetic for it at all. But she's had to learn that. So I'm wondering what is y'all's perspective on that, since all 3 of you are mothers, in handling, and franchising makes it a little bit easier because as business owners, you can have that control. But is that one reason that you were attracted to it? Or do you have any issue, especially being, Alicia, a woman in a male dominated industry? Is that something that you're conscious of, saying, oh, I've got to be here for my kids, this or that, or I'm going to leave early, or I've got to, work late instead of working in the morning? I mean, how do you navigate all of that?
I mean, it's funny that you brought up the male dominated industry. I feel like it is the case, but I don't apologize for it. I think clients identify with it more. I feel like when I'm on the phone with them and I'm like, oh, sorry, my daughter's in the background, they're like, oh, and then it starts a conversation. So it actually helps that client
rapport.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's fun to kind of incorporate my personal life with the business. We send out a Christmas card. We put my family and my daughter was on it, and that was fun. I like to talk to my clients about that. And when I hear their kids in the background, everyone's working from home right now, so there's
the pandemic has certainly changed, I think, some of that dynamic. Yeah.
So that makes it easier. It just makes a good connection, I think, with my clients. And I think that women are typically the ones that buy things, buy services, buy products. And so they're the ones that are driving them to buy service anyways.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm talking with, I mean, I'm talking with men too, but you know, there's a lot of men that buy the service and they're the ones that handle it. But I do talk to a lot of women, and that's fun.
Well, Liz, what about you? Because you're in a little bit more of the corporate side. Do you have any different experience?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I feel like probably in the last 5 years, things have really shifted. Prior to that, it was always like, you know, in my like business attire all the time. I can't be unprofessional. Unprofessional meaning I've mentioned my kids. Like I distinctly remember being in a boardroom and I was pregnant at the time. And the first 5 minutes we're talking about, oh, you're pregnant. And I was like devastated, right? Like this is not professional. And I think it's for me, at least, it shifted. And I think that having children and having a family and having dogs or whatever sort of crazy is happening makes you human.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And these days, with so little connection, especially the human connection is so important, right? And so it's something that, like, if I were to call Alicia, I'd be like, oh, how old's your daughter? We would totally have a conversation about that. And we would talk about my 4-year-old son and, you know, build a rapport. And so I think definitely in an earlier time, I don't think that it was professional to bring your family up in conversation.
Mm-hmm.
I think now it's in my perspective, it's shifted and we're human. Like not perfect all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank goodness.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is just like a really hard standard.
Well, it is, and it's disparate between women and men. Elise, what about you? Have you had any kind of experience with those feelings?
Definitely. And my son's 6, and I just have to say, I feel like we've made some great changes in the last couple years. And as a mom, you know, I try to be that employer that's flexible and all about family time. I got 5 weeks off when I had my son, and I had a job that I felt, and at the time I didn't have the support that I felt like I could be a mom. And it's something that really bothered me for a long time. And I now understand work-life balance. And I think COVID has helped a lot with that, shifting people's, you know, focus to, we don't have to work 60, 70 hours a week and neglect our families, right? No, I'm just kidding. We can have both, you know.
Right.
So that attracted me to franchising huge. I mean, once I was in that role for about 3 years, working a lot of hours. And I decided, hey, I think I can do something that's just as impactful, where I have a lot more flexibility, and being able to be at your kid's soccer game, you know, being able to sign them up for things and actually go, you know, that's important. And I think that, that as employers, we're recognizing that more. I love, like Alicia said, I can say to my client, oh, gotta go pick up my kiddo. And then we get to talk about my kiddo. And I would have never done that a couple of years ago. I mean, I just wouldn't. I would have, and it would have felt, like Liz said, super unprofessional to even reference that I, you know, have birthed a child, that I don't do anything but this job. You know?
Exactly.
I love that shift. I mean, I have a team meeting every week, and my marketer brings her baby, you know, and it's for about an hour, and it's kind of fun and exciting. And we get our meeting done, and that's what works for us. And she has childcare when she's working, obviously, but so I think we all have come to, it's a better way of living, and we've seen that working in other countries, and we're kind of taking a look at ourselves saying, hey, you know, they're getting something right that we're missing, you know?
Yeah. You know, it's funny. I had my son, when he was 2, my son who's now 18, when he was 2, he had a seizure disorder, and I was working as a Social Security disability representative. So I was going to court all the time, and the federal courthouse wouldn't let you have a cell phone or anything. And I could not be out of contact. And I was a single mom at that time. And my ex-husband wasn't reliable enough to let him be the one who would answer the phone. So I had to kind of fight for myself. I had to go through security, and I'm like, I got a pager, and the only person who had it was my mom and the teacher.
Right.
And I was like, can I please take this in? And he had to go ask the judge, and it was a big deal. And it was kind of embarrassing is not the right word, but I felt very self-conscious that I had to ask the judge if I could bring this pager in. But the choice was, I can either bring it in or I'm not coming, you know, because I have to be available for any kind of emergency. So I think, I mean, that was 16 years ago. I think things have
It's
improved to
changed.
where it wouldn't feel so heavy of a weight. And,
Right.
courts are different too, because judges like to be lofty and powerful. But it's an interesting thing to hear all of you talking about it, because I think it has changed a lot in the last couple of years, but even in the last 10 to 15, women are allowed to be women and mothers.
Right.
Yes.
There's no doubt. And even the generation before, I'm a baby boomer. My kids are 40 and 42. And I was a single mama. And I'm telling you, there was no room for children if you were
Right.
creating a career, which is why I became an entrepreneur.
Mhm.
But I wanted to point something out. Ladies, when Elise called her son kiddo, did you notice that?
Yeah.
Nobody can call her kiddo, but she can call
Because he's my kiddo.
He's an actual kid.
He's a small child.
The big
who can't
difference,
really
he's an
read.
actual kid.
Yeah.
I thought it was so cute. It's like other people don't call me a kiddo, but
Yeah. It's very
That's too
hypocrite.
so
At least I didn't call you kiddo, Rebecca.
There
that's
you
right.
go.
There you go. I would love to be called kiddo. That
Right?
That's funny how perspective changes, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if we could shift gears a little bit. We talked about the millennials and the female part of this. Are you guys open to talking about how female millennials in business are different than male millennials in business? If I give you some statistics and some data, I want your opinion on it and what your perception is of working with other franchisees, or in your case, Liz, also at the corporate level, working with fellow millennials that are men. Are you comfortable with this conversation?
We'll see where the data goes.
Oh my goodness, here's funny. Okay, so one of the pieces of data that I thought was very interesting was as women entrepreneurs who are millennials, you outscored men of the same generation in the areas of commitment, developing others, and innovation. You actually outscored in about 23 areas in certain markers. But talk to me, do you think that this idea of commitment, first off, do you agree that you as female millennials tend to be better at commitment than millennial men?
I mean,
Yes,
is
as
that
the
even a
female,
millennial
yeah.
thing?
It's just a thing.
I think it's just a thing. What does your data show about the other generations, Rebecca? Because I'm pretty sure it's consistent.
It's a steady decline from boomer to Xer to millennial to Z. So it is.
But do the men and women across the board, is it the same
across the
thing?
board, it's been dropping. The commitment has been dropping. Commitment to one another, commitment to a project, commitment whatever. It's been a steady decline from generation to generation, but it's been a serious decline for men. So, but you're right. I think in general, we are, as women, tend to be more committed.
Yeah. I think it's a fair assessment, but I don't know what other factors take into account. Like, we as women continue to rise, right? Which holds men in some cases less accountable for that traditional, breadwinner role, right? And so, is there some correlation to women being breadwinners and men not having as big of a commitment in the workplace because of it? I don't know, but I feel like there's a lot of different factors in that as the generations change, because I'm working all the time. I mean, in my household, I work a lot, so I think that certainly has something to do with it.
Yeah. What do you ladies think, Alicia, Elise?
It's a tricky question.
It's loaded.
Not to put you on the spot or anything. Yeah.
And I'm not suggesting it's a good, bad, or even indifferent. It's just an interesting trend for us to be watching. And as business owners, what we're predicting is women are on the rise in business ownership, entrepreneurship, franchising for a lot of reasons, this being one of them. The ability to 100% commit to something and do what is necessary and take the initiative to do that, where we're seeing a little bit of a drop for men not having that same level of commitment. And like you said, there's lots of factors involved in that, but we definitely see a correlation as the rise of women in franchising and owning businesses. They are consistently showing stronger commitment levels, stronger initiative levels, better at developing others, meaning teams and collaboration. And
well, it's the relationship piece
Mhm.
that we tend to be better with.
yeah,
Agree.
And the
It's
developing others. We're interested in the relationship, right? And so that's why that one to me is super obvious.
yeah.
So,
I think I tend to notice, and it's just a perspective and not a stereotype or anything. Again, it's a loaded question, so bear with me. But I do see some, just from experience of other maybe younger male business owners, is just wanting instant gratification. And I think as women become more empowered, our expectations are higher. I think in a general sense, a lot of us have higher expectations. And then we have a group of people who have grown up with, if this isn't interesting, very quickly I can move on to the next thing, whether it's, something I'm watching, somebody I'm dating, a friend even, I can just I can put a message out on Facebook and have 8 different people to choose from to hang out with tonight. I mean, that's the mentality. And I do kind of blame technology a little bit. So when that's so easy and I can get this instant gratification, I should just be able to buy this business and things should be great. My franchisor should make sure that, I'm successful, and as long as I want to achieve, I don't actually have to do anything. Right. So I think there is a little bit of, and people use that entitlement phrase, but I think if we drill it down and kind of funnel it down, it's more of an instant gratification. Or, if something doesn't happen in my timeline, whatever my timeline is, I'm moving on, and that's unfortunate. And there's a lot of missed opportunities in that. And it's, again, nothing to men, but as women, I think a lot of us were raised really doing a lot in our households and, doing a lot of tasks and then adding work into that. We're moms and then we're adding all of these layers. And so that creates a pretty good work ethic, I would say. And so, were men given those men given those same opportunities in their home from their families? I don't know. I think that's getting better, that, we're not expected to be the full-time homemaker and the full-time breadwinner. And men, like Liz was saying, are shifting to different roles. And there's a ton of stay-at-home dads, and I love that.
Right.
And, women who are, the breadwinners in the family. So yeah, I think that things are just sometimes too easy, and anything that's worth it is not easy.
right.
Delayed gratification is a wonderful attribute. Allows us to have that grit and that tenacity, and the point that you made, probably greater commitment. It's getting out of that instant gratification mindset, being comfortable with delayed gratification, which means I have to do these many things before I probably will get a result. So really, it's probably not so much about gender in general, but more about this mindset of some things aren't instant. Even though we raised in a technical world, we assume everything's at our fingertips. And
now we can Amazon will send it overnight. So my kids are growing up like, Mom, buy me this, and they expect it to show up at the door, and I'm like, this doesn't work that way. So
It's
it's
so
gonna
true.
get
And
worse.
you think about that accessibility. You can take a course and be certified to do something very quickly these days
This is
online from your living room in your pajamas. So you can shift. Like I have friends I call them, they have career ADD, because now I'm going to be a realtor. Now I'm going to be this, and now I'm going to be that. And they don't, it's like you said, Elise, they don't dive deep into something. And I can see that being a generational thing as things became more and more at our fingertips.
Clear,
Too many choices.
And you can download everything.
yeah.
And you're an expert in 2 minutes.
Exactly.
Absolutely. I love it. So Alicia, did you have anything else that you wanted to comment on that?
I mean, both of these ladies brought up excellent points. I agree with everything they said.
Yes, me too. So this is be kind of the last question around statistics, because I know they can be a little heavy. There's this thing called emotional and social intelligence. I'm sure each of you have studied it to some degree. Emotional intelligence having to do with all of those things of managing myself, managing my thoughts, managing my emotions, managing my mouth, my time, my budget. Each of you have talked about that we call that emotional intelligence. And social intelligence, all those things having to do with relationship management. Liz, you talked about that. So relationship management and social intelligence includes things like being influential, building a team, collaborating, conflict management, leadership, all of those things. So there's about 20 markers in there, 18 of which women outscored men, millennial to millennial. So women in general in your generation have stronger emotional and social intelligence than their peers that are male. So even though everything has been driven by technology and instant gratification, etc., how is it you continue to have better social intelligence and emotional intelligence, especially as business owners? What's your opinion on that?
I kind of feel like women just rise to the occasion, you know, they kind of fill the void, and we're able to kind of expand, be more flexible with the situation than maybe a man would be.
I think so. I think adaptability is a part of it.
I think Liz made a comment earlier that relates right back to this. We understand the importance of relationships. And I think that when you have valuable, deep, emotional, intimate relationships, you know, friendships, you know, business relationships, you become more emotionally intelligent. And to be emotionally intelligent and to remain emotionally intelligent, you have to care about other people's feelings. You have to care about other people, and not that, you know, we care more, but I think my perspective is maybe it's a relationship thing. We typically have more friends. We have, and that's the kind of the stereotype, but I think it plays out in the emotional intelligence. And I think it's just goes back to a lot of, you know, even being a single gal and dating, you know, they were raised in households where they weren't really supposed to be emotional. You know, I think there's a lot of hope, you know, as we raise future generations, you know, to express themselves. But I do think it comes back to relationships, and that we find a lot more value than men do, I think.
I think it also, I don't know if you ladies have ever heard the analogy or the example of how like a man's brain is very compartmentalized, but a woman's brain is like spaghetti. But I think that spaghetti thing has something to it, right? Because when you, and I can tell you that I was raised very black and white, like very right or wrong, and it took a long time in my career to realize that is not life. Life is all in the gray. But I think women with that sort of spaghetti, we have to find the gray all the time, you know, like we're juggling all the things, you know, and I think that's why we perform better with that emotional and social intelligence, because we can't be compartmentalized. Everything's always
intertwined.
Yes, it's all intertwined. So
it's so true. My husband's 9 years older than me, so he's a very bottom end of the baby boomers, and I'm an X. Every time we have 5 kids between us, and something will happen, and he'll talk to somebody, and then I'll say, "Well, how did that make them feel?" And he's like, "I don't know. I didn't ask them how they felt about it." I'm like, "Why not?"
Or my husband will be like, "Oh, I can't believe they let that kid do that at school. I'm going to call him." And I'm like, "Well, what did our daughter do?" Like there was something that happened that led to this action. So can we talk about that for a minute? Like we see that there are like 2 sides to every story. So, you know.
Right.
That's so funny.
Wow. But I think you're right. I think we are brain-wise different. Chemically, we're different, and we put emphasis in different place. And I think it's a classic example of why you guys are doing so well in your careers and in your businesses
Thank you.
because of these putting all these things to work in your businesses. So I do think we have one last question, right, Elizabeth?
Yeah, we're going to have one last and then we'll do a wrap up. I just, after having all these conversations and analyzing everything to death, I want to know what each of you thinks your greatest strength is. And it can be in business or personal or both or a crossover or whatever it is. But what is your greatest strength as a woman, period?
I think this point came up earlier in the conversation, but I feel like my greatest strength is it's recognizing all the details in the business and following through with getting them done. And I didn't realize that was so difficult for most people. I didn't realize it was such a strong thing to have, but I feel like, I've been on the phone a lot, I'm always on the phone, but dealing with different vendors and stuff, and they're like, oh, come work for us, because you are more on top of it than I am. I've heard that multiple times recently, which is kind of funny. But I feel like the follow through is huge.
Yes.
And that's, it kind of drives me crazy sometimes too, because there's a million thoughts always in my head.
I got to do this. I got to do that. What about this? Right.
I have a million lists going on.
Oh, yeah.
I love it. I love it. That's a great attribute to have. Elise, how about you? What is your...
I think as a woman and just a person, probably grit. I think that I love that word because it's gritty. But I think it's an attribute that serves me well personally and professionally. So I think, when the times get tough, the tough get going, back to the cliche, and in life we have challenges personally that can affect our businesses. We have business challenges that affect us personally. We have random pandemics that affect the whole world, so it comes back down to getting up every day, and having a clear vision of what's important to you. And that really is grit. So
grit.
That's a good one too.
Yeah. Love it. Great. Great.
So I'm going to go and say that I was recently asked by a mentor of mine to come up with the thing that I want to be known for in franchising. And it was really hard for me because there's so many tangibles, right? I can be known for improving financial performance. I can be known for creating X, Y, and Z lists that help franchisees. And at the end of the day, I emailed him back and I said, relationships, because the relationship moves the results. The relationship makes them feel supported, right? Like the relationship at the end of the day is the most important part. And I've come a long way. I think a prior manager of mine would be like, who are you? But that's what I feel like my greatest strength is. And I've grown into it. But I really feel like when he asked me that question, I sat and I said, it could be any number, but I want it to be intangible. I want it to be relationships, because I can get all the numbers after that.
Yeah.
So.
Wow. These are fabulous strengths. And interestingly, it showed in all of your answers when we were asking you questions, these three wonderful attributes. So if someone wanted to speak to you or they want to learn more about your individual franchise concepts, how would they get hold of you or your franchise concept? Liz, let's start with you. How would they learn about you and Home Franchise Concept and the 4 brands?
Sure. So they could email me, obviously, at liz.colon. Yeah, email me. I will help you. Liz.colon, spelled as you see it on the screen, COLON, at gohfc.com. Based on what you need to know, I will help direct you to the right people, which is also something I love, which is connecting. So happy to have you email me. That would be the best way.
Beautiful. Elise?
Probably the same. Or you can also contact us on our website at carepatrol.com and follow the link for me in Spokane, or you can email me at Biviano, look for the spelling there, at carepatrol.com.
Thank you. And
Thank you.
Alicia.
You can also email me and I can connect you with the right people if you're interested in the franchise, or if you're just interested in speaking with me about my experience. I'm happy to answer emails. Best one to reach me at is mh62@mosquitohunters.com.
Mosquito hunters. And if you need to hunt some mosquitoes, same email to get help.
On Long Island.
Yes, that's what I was just
yeah.
going to say that too, Alicia. I'm Long Island. You're not going to fly out to California, Alicia?
You know what? I have family in California. I grew up in California, so
It's possible.
You never know, right?
Ladies, you have been so much fun and shared so many great insights. We really appreciate you giving us an hour of your time.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
having us.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
What do you think is the #1 challenge for franchisors? You got it, getting the right fit franchisee. And as you know, poor fit franchisees are often poor performers. Poor fit franchisees cost more to train and support. Poor fit franchisees are rarely satisfied or compliant, which can lead to validation issues. Not a good place to be. But now there is a solution. Zoracle Profile's scientific spot-on match program. Working with top broker groups in franchising, Zoracle has created a platform that scientifically matches the broker's candidate to the right fit franchise brand. Spot On Match predicts the compatibility, performance, and viability of a prospective franchisee. Spot On Match gives the franchise development team a data-driven and scientific approach to selling franchises. This is how it works. Zoracle works with each franchisor to establish their top performer blueprint. This research assesses current franchisees to determine the key psychographic indicators that separate high performers from mid to low performing franchisees. The final result of the research is the brand's Eclipse report, which compares prospective franchisees to a franchise system's high performers. Finally, brokers are running a spot-on profile on each of their franchise prospects. These profiles are then scientifically bumped up against the franchisor's high performer algorithms, and the match process begins. Dashboards are built for the franchisor and the broker to make sure the process is smooth and trackable. Right fit matches instantly. Find out how you can be a spot-on match member. Save time. Stop guessing. Start matching. Call Zoracle Profiles